My son stood up his mom like she did years ago. I had my son with my then girlfriend just after high school. We got married at just 18 and 20. Christian parents. From the moment he was born, I loved him. But my ex thought otherwise. She'd blame him for ruining her life, leading her to mentally and verbally mistreat my boy up till we divorced. It was a clean break, as she left with her new rich boyfriend saying if her future was ruined, her new rich boyfriend can help her live the life she wanted. My son is such an angel. He always thought it was his fault and tried to do his best to be the best son for me, leading him to be very easily influenced by others' criticisms and stuff. Since his classmates' moms treat their kids right, everyone's hero is their mother. Even after all the abuse she put him through, he still wanted to visit her. His normal bad parenting, making plans she couldn't attend to. I'd understand if it's once or twice, but all the times? Not even once? Not even a freaking weekend or even a few hours. He basically had no maternal figure in his life, and this made him have trust issues and became really quiet. But thank goodness for therapy, he got much better. The gym became a stress reliever, and now he's a strong, intelligent senior in school. He's the perfect child. It's only about 6 months ago he got texts from his mother asking to meet him. For a week straight, he was so happy, and reasonably happy to meet someone who had hurt him so bad at such a young age, but it was not my place to tell him who he should meet. The day he was supposed to meet her at a coffee shop to catch up, my son got a call from his mom asking where is he. Sorry, something came up at work, can't meet today, before hanging up. For 6 months, whenever they made plans, he was a no-show. I wasn't aware of any of this, but my ex called to tell me about my son's behavior, saying he's acting out of line and should be disciplined. I'm sorry, but when she was explaining, I just straight up started cracking up. I told her that he's doing what she did to him years ago, and I will not be disciplining him for something she indirectly taught him. I feel bad for her, but is my son really that wrong to no-show his mom? My son did want a relationship, but decided against when she accidentally let it slip that she wanted money. It was over a phone call, so I have no evidence that that's what she wants. But knowing her, it sounds exactly like what she do. I believe she married me not only because of her parents, but also the fact that my parents did own quite a big business in my home country that made them somewhat wealthy. She started getting quite irritable when I wanted to not take over the business. Their business is buying and selling stocks or whatever. My current career is a chemist. Another thing I saw was that my son was quite petty in this revenge. Of course, there's a lot of hatred and resentment towards his mom. Not for her abuse, but the fact that she contacted him for money. My son works as a freelancer in my parents' business, just some admin work. She knows that if she called me, I would have straight up said no. Now for the top comments. Nah, good on him. She has no right to demand that her son get disciplined when she clearly didn't care about him until now. She literally mentally and verbally mistreated him when he was younger, and now she expects him to just forget everything? Good on him for giving her a taste of her own medicine. Good for him. It might be worth sitting down and saying, as your dad who is supposed to teach you respect and kindness, that's mean. But as your dad who is supposed to teach you to stand up for yourself and solve problems creatively, I'm so damn proud of you. What you did may have not been right, but it sure as heck wasn't wrong. I mean, it's funny, but it's also still clear your son is holding on to a ton of anger and resentment against her. Please make sure he stays in therapy. The gym can't be his only outlet for stuff like this. It's just not enough for issues this significant. It's also still clear your son is holding on to a ton of anger and resentment against her. I wouldn't let this take control of my life, but no chance in hell I would ever forget or forgive this. I would spare only the apathy and rejection she has shown, no more no less. This kid owes nothing to their genetic donor. Next story. My niece was the reason my marriage fell apart, and now she's completely a narcissist like her mother anyhow. This is long, so let me apologize in advance, but I need to say the things I keep bottled up inside me somewhere anywhere. About 7 years ago, my ex-husband and I had a decent marriage. It wasn't perfect, but marriage rarely is. Our kids were well behaved. We both worked, and we had our kids in activities outside of school to keep them healthy and active. We had one blimp, where intimacy had died off for about a year, but we had talked and took an adult-only vacation and sparked that back too. My sister had moved a few years prior, about 6 hours away from the family. She uprooted her kids because she needed a change after her divorce. The problem was, she basically began to act like a teenager, staying out all night partying or drinking, and made her oldest child care for the younger two, as well as her new friends' children too. Summer vacation approached that year, and my mom asked me to go pick up my nieces and nephew for a month-long visit. We arranged for the oldest to stay with me and the younger to stay with my mother so that the oldest would get a break. When I arrived to pick them up, my sister told me her oldest did not want to come, but she was forcing her to. For the first 2 weeks, my niece cried every day. I finally approached her and told her I was sorry she didn't want to be here, but she cried harder and told me she wasn't crying because she didn't want to be here. She was crying because she didn't want to go home. My husband and I spoke about her moving in with us at 18, but she told me if she returned home, she wouldn't live to see 18. He was very against taking her in. Not because he didn't love her, but because it was a financial burden to our family, and a fight with my family if we did. But I believed my niece's threats and I fought. First him, then my sister and my mom. We ended up keeping my niece through tons of fights. We got very little to no help financially or emotionally, but we did the best we could by her. But it was a crack, like the kind you get in your windshield and it just keeps getting bigger every time something small hits it. My niece got pregnant as a teen, just like her mother. The crack grew. My husband and I fought about money. The crack grew more. By the time my niece moved out at 17 and back in and out again, the windshield was beyond repair. My now ex and I recently divorced, and while my niece isn't the only reason, she's absolutely the reason the windshield got weakened enough to break. Now, she's 21 and she treats me as disposable. She only calls on me when she wants something from me and often ignores my calls and texts. She told me she thought I had a perfect family and that she regretted moving in with us because she was wrong. Never once thinking she was what changed the dynamic so much. To say that it hurts my feelings is an understatement. My ex and I are building a friendship again and I'm thankful for him. My birthday just passed and not one member of my family acknowledged it, outside of my kids. But my ex and his stepmom both did and I'm very grateful for them. It's hard when you hear blood is thicker than water over and over, only to realize blood family sometimes is unhealthy for you. But I'm learning. Edit, since I see this recurring in the comments, let me say that both me and my ex-husband did everything to make my niece feel welcome and safe. We had her in therapy. When she told me she was having sex, it took her to get her on a pill. We taught her to drive and took her to soccer practice and drama club and everything else she asked to join. I don't blame my niece fully. 1, she was a child. 2, I made my choices. I could have said no. My ex-husband did say he didn't want to take her in until she was 18, but he also helped me when I begged to do it. I believe I'm allowed to be frustrated at my niece for her parts. And no, I would absolutely never say any of this to her, because you just do not do that to kids. Thus, this rant post on Reddit is to get out some of my negative feelings. Trust me, I own my own faults, but that's a whole different post to make. Cut your niece off. Stop enabling her. She made her decisions. It's not your responsibility anymore at all. I would start by telling him that he was right. Thank you. I'm working on cutting out people part. My ex and I get along well now that divorce dust has settled, and I have apologized to him many times now for the decisions I have made and the things I've done. We may never be a couple again, but I believe we will always be friends and that's pretty good too. Good for you and your ex, and for your kids for having mature parents. Like others have told you, both you and your ex need to free yourselves from the burden of helping your niece. Any responsibility you may have once had is gone now that she's an adult. You and your branch of the family don't need to deal with the poison of the other branch. On the flip side, if you had turned her niece away and niece did end up ending herself, your marriage would have been over as well, and you and your ex might not be friends. How are you gonna call them narcissistic when you legit made a whole situation about you? You forced your husband to take her in. Did you do any type of therapy with her? Or did you just take her in and go, damn, look at me, I'm such a good person? Therapy, sports, drama club, we taught her to drive and helped her every step of the way. We tried our best to treat her as our own, and that includes my ex-husband. While he didn't love the situation, he tried to be the best father figure to her he could be. You'd have to ask her if she felt resentment from him, because it's obvious that he didn't want to do this from the get-go. I also wouldn't be shocked if you spilled some of the rage you feel for her in this post into her daily life as well. In the end, you picked up a traumatized/abused child. It really shouldn't upset you that much that she ended the way that she has. Her early years weren't the best, and that stuff legit will affect your entire life. Especially to a point where you blame her for your marriage falling apart. Last story. My brother will never move out of my parents' house, and I seem to be the only one who sees why. I just have to vent this somewhere. I don't really have anyone to talk to about it who would understand, and I literally don't have time for therapy. I, 31 female, have a brother, 28 male, who lives in my parents' basement and will never leave. He hasn't had a steady job in years. He can't get a girl to date him, and of course he blames feminism for this. My mom literally cleans up after him. Like homeboy can't even be bothered to bring his dirty dishes to the kitchen. My mom goes to his room and gets them for him. She pays him to help her around the house. Both of my parents make endless excuses for him. And I really don't know why, because all he does is whine and complain and generally acts like a jerk to them. My parents claim that they raised my brother and I exactly the same. They claim to have been blindsided by my brother's basement-dwelling fate, but I call this exact scenario over 20 years ago. Growing up, my brother would get rewarded for doing the most simple tasks. My mother was never short of praise for anything my brother did. I remember he would get allowance money every weekend for doing hardly any chores. I, on the other hand, could hardly have a weekend to myself, plus without my mother scolding me for not doing something, not doing it well enough, not doing it long enough, etc. If it wasn't house chores, it was extracurricular activities, which I was doing to the point of exhaustion. No matter how much I did, it seemed like it just wasn't enough. The thing is, I really wasn't a bad kid in general. I never had any disciplinary issues in school. But as soon as I came home, you would have thought I was Satan himself from the number of restrictions put on me. My mom was constantly going through my things and she never did this with my brother. So on top of never having time for myself to just goof off and be a kid, I never had privacy. I started hiding my diary in a hole in the dry wall of my closet because my mom openly admitted to reading it. I became highly introverted and guarded, and I barely made any friends in school. My brother, it seemed, was given the free rein to do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted with no consequence. In hindsight, I think my parents were being sexist in how they raised us. But at the same time, I just thought my parents, especially my mom since she was our primary caregiver, were plain dumb to be always giving so much praise to my brother when he did so little to earn any of it. I really started to resent both my parents and my brother in middle school, and I was pretty open about my frustrations. Of course, they blamed hormones and teen angst, but at 31, those feelings haven't gone away. I've just gotten better at disguising them for the sake of protecting my parents' feelings. I started devising a plan to move out pretty early, even trying to run away a few times. There was a point where my parents were deflating my bike tires every weekend and hiding the pump. I managed to get out pretty much the minute I turned 18 and moved into my own apartment several states away. Because of the way I was raised, I can't stand having anyone control me or my life, and I'm very sensitive about who is in my space and for how long. In addition to living alone, most of my adult life, I've always been self-employed since moving out of my parents' house, so I had to hustle really hard to maintain this lifestyle. And yeah, that meant doing some morally questionable activities, but I don't regret it because I never had to move back in with my parents, and I've always been in control of myself. The only time I wasn't was when I was married to my abusive ex, and what really sealed the deal in leaving that guy was how much he reminded me of living with my parents. Nowadays, I'm working as a full-time freelance artist, and I actually get really high-end gigs and make pretty decent money. My parents have a bizarre relationship with my success. They seem to want to take credit for it in some ways, which I guess they should because it was how much I hated being around them and hated having someone telling me what to do that motivated me to choose this career path and get good at it. On the other hand, though, they can't talk about any of my accomplishments with the rest of my family because it makes my brother wildly jealous. My brother, who I should mention does have time for therapy and supposedly goes, blames his inability to get out of the house on me. And my resentment of him while we were growing up, he says I traumatized him. My parents tell me that it's his trauma that I caused that has him unable to function in the world and move out of the house. And since I'm apparently the source of this trauma, anytime I'm at my parents' house, my brother makes a point to avoid me. The last time I was there, while I was hanging out with my mom, her phone was going off every second with a text from my brother complaining that I was there visiting. Everything I did while visiting my parents had to be carefully choreographed around my brother, and he still wouldn't stop complaining. I'm basically a second-class citizen in my parents' house every time I visit, because his needs must always come first. At this point, I don't even know what to tell my parents. It's obvious to everyone around them that they're enabling my brother to be a perpetual child, but my mom has a never-ending list of excuses for why she can't kick him out. And how he's just about to get into the field he's always wanted to be in. He just needs a little more time to get on his feet, blah blah blah. And of course, it's all my fault because I was the difficult child, and he wasn't. I feel like I've been sabotaged out of ever really having a loving and supportive family because they're too busy cuddling my brother. Anyways, thanks for reading my rant. I feel better now. Is your name Shannon, perchance? I have a pair of cousins just like you. Sister is incredibly hardworking. Graduated college early, got a master's, bought her own place at 31, has always had a minimum of 2 jobs. Her younger brother is 36, dropped out of school, never had a job or a girlfriend, and lives in his parents' cottage smoking weed all day. Yet, for some reason, every time you talk to them, it's Rob this and Rob that and Rob starting a surfboard-making business. He isn't. They've coddled him into being a bum and acts like everyone doesn't know it. It's bizarre, and just once I'd like to interrupt one of their monologues about all the great stuff their son is up to and tell them he's a freaking burnout bum, and anyone with eyes could see it. No, it isn't, but I feel your pain, Shannon. I actually think your parents did you a favor by being strict unknowingly. The way they coddled your brother has made him not be able to function in society. Your parents will and are growing old, and it will reach a time when they themselves will need someone to take care of them. Do you think your brother will?